So we've been convening this Pacific Regional CSO Forum focusing on peace and security from the 1st to the 3rd of June. And I think it's a very important precursor before I share the outcome statement, given that the Pacific Islands Forum Regional Security Committee meeting begins today and concludes tomorrow. This is an important time for us as civil society organizations committed to peace-building practice across the 22 Pacific Island countries and territories of our region to come together. So as GPAC and FemLink Pacific, we've welcomed the opportunity to have this forum with our partners from WAC Pacific, the Pacific Conference of Churches, and of course our civil society partners such as the House of Chameleon. We've also had local peace builders and our network members from Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Bougainville. We weren't able to get a representative from the Marshall Islands, however, they are part of the network. So we are calling for inclusive and accountable peace building, a peace building architecture infrastructures for peace that will enhance collaboration between Pacific governments, the regional intergovernmental organizations and peace-building networks. And we're mindful also that the Pacific has an evolving regional architecture, so it's quite important that we see and are able to collaborate with all the different regional intergovernmental organizations. This year also, 2015, as Pacific people, we recognize there are 3 interconnected reviews taking place at the global level: the Peace Building Architecture Review, the review on the peace operations, and of course the global study on UNSCR 1325 on women, peace and security, which is very important that as Pacific communities we are being heard in these processes in order to define the peace and security that we see for our region. This year also in September, Pacific governments with other member states will be adopting the new Sustainable Development Goals, and we're keen to see a strong commitment to peace and stability, not only in the Goal 16, but of course across all the key indicators of the goals, demonstrating the nexus between gender equality, peace and development. The CSO Forum has been a very important time for solidarity. We recall over the last few days that more than almost 20 years ago, the Pacific Island region was still a nuclear testing ground, and while the recent Non-Proliferation Treaty Conference concluded in New York without an outcome statement, amongst the 107 countries who have committed to the humanitarian pledge, they include Fiji, Kiribati, Marshall Islands, Palau, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. And we're hoping that, and we're urging that Nauru, Solomon Islands, and Tonga also commit to this pledge, given the need to fill the legal gap for the prohibition and elimination of nuclear weapons. The forum has been an important time for us to come together from our different experiences at the community level, working at national level, and collaboratively at the regional level to define our peace and security. And that our definitions of peace and security are focusing on ensuring the protection and promotion of values which enhance human rights, freedoms, human dignity, and fulfillment. We also recognize that preventative action must respond to the drivers of conflict, which, as we've been discussing this week, include political, economic, social, cultural, and environmental factors and issues such as inequalities, injustice, joblessness, natural resource exploitation, human rights abuses, political exclusion, and corruption. And we're also urging all Pacific Island governments to ratify the Arms Trade Treaty as a commitment to the prohibition of arms transfer and the prevention of future tragedies caused by small arms and light weapons that we continue to experience in our region, and our colleagues from Bougainville and Papua New Guinea, as well as the Solomon Islands, can also speak to that. We want to ensure a shift from reaction to prevention, and we want to urge Pacific governments and our partners to recognize the multi-dimensional approach that is needed. And that means seeing the connection and working across development, political, security, and justice areas. The different dimensions are interdependent, and you can't solve one without addressing the other. And this requires local, national, and regional efforts for preventive action through dialogue, mediation, peace education, and investing in a human security approach. So our key recommendations going forward from the CSO Forum include the call for a strengthened regional peace-building architecture. This is a really important time to amplify the voices from the local level. We're calling for the reframing of human security, informed by communities and our priorities, which include economic, political, social, cultural, and the ecological needs of human beings. We also reaffirm and really stress the fact that preventive strategies must include the investment in youth and women's equal participation in local, national, and regional governance, peace building, democratization, and development processes. Regional intergovernmental organizations must be a bridge between national officials and civil society with a common goal of enhancing preventive action. And this requires direct channels of communication and inclusive spaces for participation, particularly on peace and security. We also call on the United Nations to support an annual engagement for civil society with regional intergovernmental organizations in our region and government officials, particularly on peace and security. With a global study on 1325 and the fact that our network has had a very vibrant engagement around the Security Council resolution, we're also reaffirming that the Regional Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, which was adopted in 2012, is a commitment by 22 Pacific Island countries and territories. And we need to move beyond simply calling for action plans, but really focusing and harnessing women's political agency on national strategies with a focus on security sector governance, peacekeeping, and humanitarian assistance in pre- and post-natural disaster action, and to support the regional conflict prevention and human security agenda. 1325 can only be implemented when there are resources for women's activism from the local to the global level, including women's political agencies, support for women's political agency to contribute to governance structures, local, national, and traditional governance structures as well. And that the participation of women in terms of peace and security is not simply limited or confined to the recruitment of women for peacekeeping operations through the military, but we want to see an increase in increased investment in the recruitment of women into the police force, which would have affirmative action and an investment in women's leadership within the police force, so we can have more women in senior positions in local police stations and national command centers, and then available for peacekeeping deployment, not just in Fiji, but across the region as well. And also that the efforts of community-based women's movements must be recognized and supported to bring about long-term prevention and social transformation. In terms of the nuclear-free and independent Pacific movement, we are reaffirming an important legacy that Pacific civil society has played in the work against nuclear testing in the Pacific, and that our work continues to build on that legacy. We're standing in solidarity with Marshall Islands that is seeking justice for the impact of nuclear testing on its people and environment via its landmark case in the International Court of Justice. We're calling for greater support for the ongoing struggle for independence and just compensation for all those affected by nuclear testing and radioactivity in Mahoi Nui, and Linda will be able to speak more to that. We're also calling for support and solidarity with the people of West Papua and their wish to be full members of the Melanesian Spearhead Group. Their full membership is a significant step towards realizing a life free of oppression, fear, and slavery, as well as the right to self-determination. And finally, in terms of environment security, which includes climate change and disasters, we're hoping that by 2016, together with GPAC, regional intergovernmental organizations, and the UN will collaborate and partner with us to invest in a Pacific REGOS conference focusing on environmental security. Because the relationship between climate change and conflict is complex, but readily apparent in our region, where entire islands are disappearing, forcing the relocation of communities which have experienced years of protracted regional conflict. Natural disasters also have a complex relationship with conflict in gender equality, or conflict in gender inequality, and the lack of access to information and resources, entrenched gender stereotypes and inequalities, and cultural restrictions make women and girls the most susceptible to natural disasters, particularly in conflict-affected settings. And our colleagues from the Solomon Islands can attest to that, and you can also speak to them in terms of their experiences, particularly following the devastating floods of last year. So it's very crucial that we support and empower those most vulnerable in our communities to adapt and mitigate the impacts of climate change and natural disaster, particularly where conflict is also a major factor. So today's outcome statement and the CSO forum has been adopted and has been endorsed by members of the GPAC Pacific Regional Steering Group, which includes FemLink Pacific, Peace Foundation Melanesia, Leitana Nehan Women's Development Agency, the Talitha Project, and Voice Pelong Mere, along with WAC Pacific and the Pacific Conference of Churches and the House of Chameleon as well.
For the Pacific Conference of Churches, there are three key things that we are in support of, and would like to continue the partnership with the GPAC as well as FemLink. And those are climate change, also the gender-based violence part of the network, as well as the nuclear ban. And I think in terms of the Pacific Conference of Churches, it has made specific resolutions in 2013 on those three key things. And it's not to say that the churches are perfect and want to put you to say that others do it, but they don't do it. It's just that within itself, it recognizes that it has its own potential to do greater things and good things, regardless or in spite of the faults that the member churches have. So in supporting the calls that have been made, I think we're mindful also of the subcommittee that is currently meeting with the Pacific Islands Forum. And so we are supporting this initiative to ask our government leaders to make a moral decisions or choices or recommendations to the Forum Island Leaders meeting in September on these key issues.
About WAC, the World Association for Christian Communication, prevents all people marginalized, allow them space to speak and to raise their concerns. We encourage dialogue and debate, enhance people's creativity and solidarity, and to respond to people's needs. We encourage dialogue and debate, enhance people's creativity and solidarity, and to respond to people's needs. Contribute towards building peace in our region, the Pacific region, and also respect for human dignity, and expressing in the Christian principle of communication. Je voudrais dire quelque chose en français. L'Association de la communication chrétienne est une organisation internationale et qui défend les droits des populations mises en marge. Leur donner la possibilité de parler, la possibilité de s'exprimer, mais surtout défendre ses droits. Nous avons pris des décisions concernant ce forum et la WAC soutient fortement, nous soutenons fortement toutes les décisions de ce forum pour une meilleure solidarité dans le Pacifique. Merci.
Thank you. The House of Chameleon, in supporting the key recommendations from this outcome document, also follows up from the previous Human Rights Conference last month on sexual orientation, gender identity that was held in Tonga in May, that was organized by the Pacific Sexual Diversity Network. So it also follows up on some of the key recommendations from the conference on human security of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people in this region. So we also support some of the outcomes in terms of making sure that the architecture, peace-building architecture in the region is inclusive of marginalized women and LGBT people. So this is an opportunity for us, for this CSO forum, to network with faith-based organizations as well as other regional organizations in the Pacific to be able to advance the human security agenda of LGBT people. So, yeah.
I just want to add two other things, and the first one is to do with self-determination, and Sharon already mentioned that West Papua is a key issue with regards to the political self-determination of territories that are currently under colonial rule. And so one is West Papua, and we're hoping, and we're proposing that the MSG meeting that will be held later this month will endorse the application of the West Papua wish to be full members of that organization. And the other point is to do with the Maui Nui, which is currently onto the UN list of 4 territories that are to be decolonized. And so we're calling as well, in terms of the region and the regional governments, to support and continue to support the Maui Nui's status on the UN decolonization list. Now, let me say it just as a point that in the security of the region should not be defined by the military way that we define it. It should be about how strong and how vibrant and how cohesive the relationships that we have within the region. And that's going back the 1960s and 70s when our leaders in the region were very much at a personal level. And national interests in terms of bilateral relations are subject to their own relationships and the moral values that define that. So security cannot be achieved unless we, as governments and civil society and churches, address the basic issues that Sharon had mentioned.
Thank you. Just bringing it back to the right to self-determination, that's one of the reasons why we're talking about peace and security for our region to be inclusive of the 22 Pacific Island countries and territories. That's part of the journey of the adoption of the Regional Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. It has arisen from women collectively working through and across the 22 Pacific Island countries and territories, both in the lead up to the Beijing conference back in 1994 and subsequent Pacific Women's meetings and Pacific Women's conferences as well. So that was a process of consultation. And so it's very important that all the regional intergovernmental organizations are supporting their member states to develop national strategies that are relevant to the women. And this also is about the women and children of West Papua as well, which is why we're also supporting the coalition efforts for the West Papua campaign to the MSG. There's a lot of conversation happening at the regional level by member states and security officials on definitions of human security, on definitions of prevention, whether they're talking about counter-terrorism measures or whether it's about really addressing some of the root causes of the conflicts that we've had in our region. And that's why it's very important that as civil society we have met over the last few days and that we are calling for a redefinition or a reframing of human security grounded in what communities are experiencing, because violence and conflict can be fueled by the experiences of the communities and can also be diffused by communities as well. And we've seen many ways that communities have been part of peace building in our region, yet when it comes to the official processes, they're not in the room, they're not participating. And that's why it's very important that women and young people are part of this process, otherwise they will continue to be marginalized as well. So it's very important, and in terms of the meetings that's happening with the regional security officials, that we're asking for these spaces through regional architectures that enable civil society to come together and engage, and that the framework we see for our region must be a framework that works for our communities as well. And we're very pleased to have the partnership of the Pacific Conference of Churches in moving forward, because as we were reminded on the panel yesterday, the church groups, the church networks or faith-based groups and networks are not simply those that come together simply to implement activities, but can provide important spaces for community consultation and dialogue and should be at the table. So we hope that this civil society forum reminds Pacific leaders that civil society, we can come together. We are very strong networks of peace builders, and we're able to mobilize and bring peace builders together. But there really must be a space of listening, understanding, and dialogue in order for us to meet those goals of peace and stability in our region.